behind all this, the kind of reality that goes through, one has to really, really go through that rigor to be able to make this happen. Else, these remain as 3Ds, these remain as these picture-perfect non-realities with us. And so that's really the struggle that one has to work with. Would we do it again next year? No. But would we do it again? Sometime for sure. You know, it comes with its aches and pains, but it's really beyond your everyday practice and projects, so something really worth it. So this was really about a museum in the middle of Ahmedabad. It was a science museum. One wanted to play with the light and shade. It was all about the genesis of life, cells. It was a human biology museum.
As I invite on stage Sourabh Gupta from Studio Archohm.
Less about just showing our work, but also about a little bit of sharing with you behind the scenes of what it takes to do this work that we all do. Basically, the idea was when I was looking at what could be an interesting conversation for an audience that's probably either already practicing or a lot of student community that's aspiring to do the same. And that's when I thought, let's try and keep it simple and just share what it takes, not just to build what we build, because that's obviously out there for everybody to see, judge, use, play with, but also what one could do and what it takes to do that and how that really pans out. And I obviously don't have any answers for this, what it takes to architecture, of course not, but my attempt in life is to understand that as well. And so here I almost a little vulnerably try and share the last 8 to 10 months of what we've been doing at a personal level, at an office level, and working on. So where maybe some of the answers could lie on how to practice, especially in India. So January began really, really well for me. It was probably one of the happiest moments of my life. My mother at 65 did her first, or at 70, did her first ever exhibition. And this was really like a second innings for her because she was a master in fine arts, used to do these landscapes, and then really opened up to last 10 years of a journey with me, very personal, very intimate journey of really looking at how to convert those landscapes and that art, how to revive herself and come up with an exhibition which was kind of more moving, more relevant, more in times with her experience of her life. And so it was really like a body of work that I kind of had lived with her, producing it in the last 10 years. And then 1st of Jan, it was one of the finest moments to see that on display. So we actually took a large exhibition space at the Bikaner house, and that's where we did this exhibition. With the exhibition, we also shared some of our work. We tried to look at, again, a way to reflect. And I always say that sharing fundamentally puts back a lot of pressure because what you put out is what you need to live with. And so sharing how we work, what we work on, so whether there were these large projects we would do in fair-face concrete, or we play with bricks on housing projects, or there were these large-scale urban design projects of working in Meghalaya, especially in Shillong, doing large-scale urban development in Bhubaneswar, or parts of Lucknow and Agra. The exhibition also very clearly put out what I firmly believe is the fundamental to architecture, which is the play of light, the play of shadow. In our case, in India, I always say designing darkness is really important. So played that out, and of course shared a little bit of the insight of what's going on in the office currently. And what the DNA of the office is, how we try to work together across the last 22 years, and what all non-architectural the practice does in its journey to be able to do what we try and do. And really try to take our position, place our position out there, and also kind of introvert reflection that would happen with the teams there. So what are contemporary Indian values? What should be done? How should our work really look at that? Or how we firmly believe that some way, somehow, ornamentation really is an escape, and how that really tries to hide things than express things, and how we need to look at what is the ornament for today, and how that escape needs to be looked at. Or perhaps one very glaring question when we read about parts of IM taken down, parts of Corbusier buildings in Chandigarh taken down. When you see all these things, I think what is heritage and how should we protect modern heritage, and why in India, unless something is 1,000 years old, doesn't really come within the framework of protection. So that's something that really has been on us. And then to look at the big question a lot of us, a lot of architects face. I am constantly told if I'm in Odisha, can we have Kalinga architecture to our buildings? Or when I go to Lucknow, can we have the style of the Nawabs? And how to position ourselves, how to play with that, and how to work around clients and realities to then be able to take that position and build responsibly. I think those were kind of things that we really, really want to look at our work. We try to be extremely critical of our work, and we look at how in spirit we could play with it. And one of the strongest ways I tried to put it out was to really go on an extreme when we were invited to be architects to a few metro stations in Mumbai, and where we said, let's keep it extremely clean and minimal, and then see how metro stations can work. I mean, everything in Mumbai shouts. So how can a metro not shout? How could a repeated, simple piece of architecture calm things down? Because there every building tries to outdo the neighbor. And to just get that done and to work around architects, engineers, to work around the politics of everything was such a challenge. But to be able to just make that stronghold of making an extremely clean, basic envelope to an experience that's going to last for 50 years, 100 years, I think was a challenge. So those are the ways we try to really put together our architecture. So January really went in dreaming a lot and then seeing how that dream doing in our life has been. So it was really a time of reflection. So that was fun. February, I was doing a lot of academic work personally, so it was time for me to be back to basics, back to masters, and back to a lot of books. I also did a fun master program. I graduated yet again, and it was really an experiment for me to be on an online-offline course to do some masters in design thinking. It was really on how intangible and the tangible come together to rejuvenate our cities. I also always constantly go back to the masters to kind of refresh myself. So whether it's a Corbusier, Kahn, or a Mies, for a lot of relevant people making choices, it would be probably a Zumthor or a Sana or an Ando. The reason I put these names out is because I really want to call out what we think we believe in and what's going on. We saw the exhibition, we saw the presentation just before us. Dr. Kara was talking about a lot of these names, and I do think these are the people who are doing relevant contemporary work in our times. And then when I look at that work constantly, I come back always to say that one has to really rewind and rethink and position. So just maybe as even at the cost of repetition, I just want to state it here how very basics of a Corbusier, of what he's done at Chandigarh should be looked at by all again and yet again. How Villa Savoy and the principles, or how probably, perhaps to me, the most powerful building ever built on this planet, that's the La Tourette chapel by Corbusier, with all its principles, is still so relevant. And of course, the sculpture of Rochon. Closer home, we are so lucky in India to have a lot of these buildings built in our country itself. So go to Ahmedabad, all you see is all the mill owners and the museums and the houses. And I think that's where we need to still be kind of rooted. Second to that, to me, in my mind, is always Kahn, who, of course, probably the definition to sublime architecture would be something, at the Salk Institute. People who've experienced with it, I'm sure, believe it, agree with me. But people who have not, these are the gems that one needs to anchor forever. That's almost like a 101 on architecture. So whether it's your Bangladesh or Closer Home, IM, and Kimball on how to play with light in places like museums or the structure of Exeter. So that's something really, really always close to me. These are almost my big pillars and anchors. And of course, not to forget Mies with the cleanliness of Barcelona Pavilion, or the Tugendhat House, which I was very fortunate to see this year, or the Farnsworth House in the US, or the absolutely newly renovated a museum renovated by the Triple architects, but a museum in Berlin, which is fantastic in its execution and its idea. So really, it is all about learning. And to me, it's a constant journey of unlearning and relearning and adapting as we work. And so keeping that afresh is something really, really hard, to put yourself back to a little bit of academia, to put yourself back to this rigor of going back to basics. But I think that's really, really important in this everyday rigmarole of our profession, our practice, with all the pressures that you and I face. Comes March. Of course, it's this big financial year ending, people work with numbers, so I thought this is the time to look at also telling how we actually do, all these images look very beautiful, but how we actually end up working with numbers, doing the dirty job of looking at contracts, doing the crazy realities of budgets, and that's what it takes to do. So this is a small example how we are looking at multiple projects in the state of Meghalaya. So it's a mix of private and public buildings, public projects. So how in a very glamorous reality we say, okay, you need to conserve the society, work with the community, and it needs to make financial sense. But when I look at it, the underlying realities are its calculations, it's number crunching all the time, making these budgets and timelines meet. It's always these contracts and working with the law, working with the government to make things work, or with the private client, convincing them how it works, and then, of course, the communication and the control of it. So, what comes out are these pretty pictures, but what really, really makes it happen is a lot of hard labor, a lot of engineering, a lot of number crunching, a lot of technical work, paperwork. I think that really also consumes a lot of us. So this is a convention center we're building with this glass, old, almost like a respect to the old clock tower that they used to be. We're building a convention center, some resorts, private resorts, some really interesting museums. This is an elephant center. We've got an elephant pass, but how to create a space safe for people, but let the elephants move in their own way within nature, or making these microbreweries and breweries to celebrate the local culture and craft in Meghalaya, or looking at Cherrapunji, this one place where, of course, it rains the most. But what people don't know is that for 6 months of non-rain, they are actually short of water. Nobody has really looked at it critically to be able to conserve that water, play with that water, celebrate that water, and do something about the local community. So putting up a research center and a community center and a resort with that, or building these little havens across this absolutely scenic and picturesque places in Meghalaya. So I just show this contrast because obviously the numbers don't look pretty to be shown on screen, but behind all this, the kind of reality that goes through, one has to really, really go through that rigor to be able to make this happen. Else, these remain as 3Ds, these remain as these picture-perfect non-realities with us. And so that's really the struggle that one has to work with. And so, there really are no shortcuts. We have to go through the rigor and that whole business of design to make these things happen. And I don't see a difference in the scale, the client type, the geography, the context. I think this really stands and holds good for all of us who practice in our everyday life. April, it was a very special, very interesting start of the year for us because we won a very interesting project working on the edge of Ganga at Patna. So it was a very funny story that we were invited to do a little sculpture and an art piece around this roundabout of this new road that the government had already built almost into the river. And when I saw this, and I saw this main road built and this green space on both sides empty at the edge of water, I couldn't resist but try and do something about it at a larger scale. And especially because you knew that if you don't, tomorrow you will have real estate development and more of the mess of the city coming out there. So we convinced the government and we made a study on what all gradually had kind of changed in the morphology of the growth of the city of Patna. We picked out all the cultural and environmental or green spaces that the city used to have and which had gotten consumed in this large urbanization, and we tried to put it all together on this one stretch. How to make the river a stakeholder, how to make the river the stakeholder of the city, because right now that's only at its level of a chat or a religion, but otherwise we've really misused and abused all our cities and all our rivers in our cities. So from a sculpture to making that entire stretch of Patlipat, I think that was important. So this was this 7-kilometer stretch, and we tried to work with the client, convince them how you could actually do much more to this. So we made this interpretation zone and an area where the water was there 365 days a year as a ghat, made a cultural precinct, because they all look at Ganga, but nobody's really understood the reality. So putting an interpretation center, a cultural center with the craft, putting the city parks. We pulled out every possible sport and every possible garden that there was, which went missing, and we put all that area, 40,000 hectares of land. We actually put all that program back onto the city. Open fields, open sports areas so the schools could kind of use up, or social spaces to bring in some bit of culture and reality. So those were done. We made it was an introverted and an extroverted side. You had the river on one side and the city on the other. So you did very little build. We told ourselves we will not do any concrete. So everything we built, everything in the project we built was out of brick. So you had different types of bricks. We went deep into the research of what bricks can do, the contracts, the tenders built in already, how these bricks would be made, to what stability, what strength. And so you would do everything on the riverfront with bricks. Second, that there would be no steps. The steps are only for sitting. So you can come down 8 meters from the top level to the mid level to the lower plaza, but every day you would just ramp. You will ramp down. So we made these basic principles and then made a very lush green park around the entire project. So what you see everywhere is just greens. This is the interpretation center. This is the interpretation center for Ganga. It's a large museum. So you enter through a water feature. This is all these kinds of playing fields. I'm not going into the details of the project because the intent is to really share how we are working rather than what exactly we deep dive into. But again, if you see, there are glass, there is bricks, there is terracotta, and we've tried to limit ourselves and our palette to that, and to build this one big part of the city which is celebrating everything that our cities lack. And luckily for us, the project seems to be going well, going through. We should be able to, it's getting tendered and constructed as I speak. So things are moving, and those are the kinds of things that keep us alive. So it was a great start for us this April to see a project like this taking shape. So when you pitch for projects, now this was really like a wild card entry. And I must say that these look really good, this looks fun. But again, I think ask anybody here or anybody who's working on this field, not even, I'm being optimistic when I say 1 in 10 make it. You pitch 10 times such things, you put your heart and soul on 10 such things, and only 1 ends up making it. So, you need to take these calculated measures, but you need to have a super large heart if you want to try and attempt a change like this. So that's something which was a very big learning, but it's also reassuring because this one victory probably has already put its case in front of me to try another 10 or another 20 for the next time. May was, of course, we were doing a lot of work within our office, back to drawing boards, models, wooden models, and we were doing about 4 museums we were pitching for in Gujarat. So just giving you a sense of the kind of work that was being produced within the office, trying to look at the various things that were going on inside the office. So this was really about a museum in the middle of Ahmedabad. It was a science museum. One wanted to play with the light and shade. It was all about the genesis of life, cells. It was a human biology museum. And our understanding of Ahmedabad with its temperature, climate, was really to build something which was always shaded, to build a public space which was also a museum, which was also an educational tool. So it was this deep step well in the middle, and galleries all around that would ramp up and actually create a lot of shaded spaces all around. So this is one big disc of about 100 meters, again under construction as we speak. Oh. So it's a simple kind of a shaded walkway that you walk up. So the roof is a public space, and the entrance and the large shaded plazas below are also public before the museum starts. a massive 100-meter dia rooftop with this circular stepwell really was the big place for people to come together and into this one shaded heaven. Then we also got 3 more projects in the same region. This is in Jamnagar, looking at light and looking at a museum for life with their mangroves. And so we had an idea of building a museum together with just solid concrete blocks, but creating a large urban space in the middle again as a public space. And yet again, another museum came through. With this one big open space being built. So Gujarat has these museums being built in every small state and a small district in there. And all these districts with all these museums put together actually pretty much create a science course of sorts for everybody. And each museum is locally relevant. So if there were mangroves, this would work. Or if I show you the other one, this is another museum in Gujarat which is getting built, which is again a science museum with a twist that you had the mountains, the 5 big mountains, and so we took with the rocks, and so we made the stone from the rock as a centerpiece, as a central courtyard, and the entire museum was built around it and rammed around it. So these are these large kind of fun museum spaces that are kind of keeping us busy. This is a visitor center next to the Statue of Unity in Ekta. So kind of creating that entire fabric of multiple areas of interest that have already been made in that area, but trying to stitch it together with the visitor center, with all the facilities around it, with complete connection to the urban fabric as a larger project. So those are the few things that really have been keeping us on our drawing boards currently as we speak at a domain of just museums. So that's something came together. I think what we really saw in this was that to make these kinds of projects become versatile, yet have a common link because they are being done by the same architects for the same client, broadly at the same time in a same culture or context of climate, was to also look at putting a team together. And this is what I would say, that constantly engaging and trying to really make a tribe, get the client buy-in, make them a part of the team, having your own team become one with it is really something that takes a lot of energy and something we like to do. June was fantastic because we had an opportunity to do the Indian Pavilion at the London Biennale. So the whole idea of what Indianness is, how we could look at putting India together, India in front, but again, looking at the contemporary and the realities and perceptions that people have about India. And then how we could do it with this one pavilion in a beautiful location in central London, on the edge of Thames, on a plaza. So that was really beautiful. And so we said, let's look at it very sensorial. Let's bring the Indian street and the chowk in reality and let people of today experience it in its own form. So we had this little build-up to a full pavilion, which obviously had all the nuances, all the limitations that the typical British bureaucracy could possibly have, from not touching the floor to not driving a nail to not having a wire, etc. Let's not get there, but getting this to put up was really, really fun. So taking a charpai as an idea, a basic idea of how that charpai is so Indian, and then exploding it and exploring it into a pavilion to create it in a very contemporary way, to play with the shadows, to play with the structure, bringing in people from all walks of life to make it very, very interesting. So we had puppets being made, bringing these earthen pots as terracotta chai cups, but inserting a magnet in them so they could stick to the metal. You could all pull out a terracotta cup, have your little chai there and take it away. So all these kind of fun things that you could bring as an Indian host to London, and then have this massive puppet show, which was obviously a big hit. Have this story of, so these puppets were telling them the story of global climate change and how mangoes of today cannot be tasting the same and the seasons are changing because obviously you're not able to predict the weather, etc. So this was one fun exercise we had, and yeah, it was a brilliant month for us. Yes, of course, we also got one of the awards at the end, so celebrations were great. And it's really impractical, I must say. It was extremely painful, but really important. I mean, would we do it again next year? No. But would we do it again? Sometime for sure. It comes with its aches and pains, but it's really beyond your everyday practice and projects, so something really worth it. July at Archohm, typically with the holiday, with the good weather, is something we try to travel a lot as a group. So it's something we've done practically for the last 20 years. So it's a bunch of people coming together, a super low budget trip to explore architecture to some part of the world. This time most of it was Eastern Europe. So looking at a lot of the realities of the World War, the Auschwitz Center, looking at a lot of modern architecture, a lot of urban spaces, river fronts, river edges, public parks and plazas, incredible work being done across the world. And it's really nice to learn, but what's really, really nice and important is to learn together. To be able to understand Adolf Loos, such a classic here, and to be able to see that work up front was really interesting. I'm really a big fan of the Bachchans, and so there was this street named on them, and there was this little typical Polish statue there. It was fun. And so it was really about seeing it together. So the whole idea of exploring, but exploring together, sharing that experience, the understanding elevates. And I think that's something that's really a lot of fun. I think I need to go a little faster. This is an easier month. Coming back from the fun of Europe was to go to the grinds of what it takes to do site work. So this is really just about the fights and the nonsense of really, really getting your hands dirty. It's really about seeing sites. So these are some 4 small mining townships that we are involved with, we are working for, which are these structures all over that need to be built. And every day, everywhere, it's a constant. You have to watch through cameras, you need to go to sites, you need to get this done. Again, something I wanted to bring down, that what the glamour of images and the fun of conceptual stories or structural diagrams and all these things don't take up, is the reality is that in actual you need to get down and get things built. Unless that happens, these pretty images, these great ideas are just there and that much. And I think that's what is something everybody should understand. And so I really hope people understand that the architecture really is that site. It's something that you can't escape. It's a reality that you must embrace. September, I was very fortunate. I'm also running a little bit out of time. I'm going to try and go faster, but I'd like to share a few stories here. I took a trip down to Brasilia. It's something I had learned in SEPT. It's something I had understood then, how Chandigarh was fundamentally a principle based on which a lot of Brasilia was built, a capital of Brazil, and something I had been wanting to explore for a long time. I got a little window of opportunity, and I just took off for 5 days, all by myself, to the city of Brasilia. And if all of us have these urges, I think we need to just take that leap of faith and just do it, because I think that was one of the smartest things I could do. We always knew Brazil culturally as this one country with its football, maybe with its coffee, but it's really the most of South America. And the way they did it was, in South America, they drew a line in the middle and they said the right the Portuguese can take, and the left the Spanish could take. So it is this Portuguese little haven where nobody travels outside. It's beautiful people, but loving their football, but it's something that's really not known. And to be able to understand that a little deeper culturally, and to be able to then also understand how Brasilia came into being, was because Brazil was constantly being taken over by different countries. And so to protect their capital, to protect their sovereignty, they wanted to bring the capital from the edges of Sao Paulo and Rio to the middle of the state, middle of the continent, and that's where the new Brasilia happened. And it says in Brazil that if you want to get things done, do it the Brazilian way, which is that Brasilia was done with this insane one-mindedness of getting things done. The entire city, all the images I'm showing you, I'm not going to take you through the details of this. Happy to do a lecture sometime because I think it's really worth it. But all this was built in 1,000 days, from being a barren crossroad to a flourishing state capital, a capital of a country larger than India. This was a state, this is the city that's running so beautifully for the last 50 years and was built in 1,000 days. And to just understand how they studied Chandigarh, how they studied the principles, how they had their own ideas. Louis Costa, who's the main master planner, and of course the architect, Oscar Niemeyer, how they went about putting this together. I think it's a story to be cherished. It's something that was so beautiful and so inspiring that I came back really fresh and raring to go. Another brilliant travel I did in the same month, but about 3 weeks apart, was travel to Estonia. And I really understood how farming forests has really been the way. And so one end of looking at the past of how Brasilia was built, and then looking at the future of how Estonia, how the wooden architecture was working was fantastic. And then again, to first understand, and coming from Delhi, I'm sorry for the people who've come from outside, I mean with this weather, with the air, this place is 50% forests, I mean the cleanest air on this planet. And they love their forests, they are still tribal, they love their yoga, their personal space, and they love the way they work with trees. A very evolved country, a beautiful city, but they build with wood, and they understand wood like nobody's business. So from the basics of building in a cold climate to understanding the wood and how high-rises or large buildings could be built, these guys just knew it all. This image especially can show you how large wooden structures have metal gantries running through. So somebody who thought that wood could not span or could not take load, you actually have metal gantries running through wood. When I asked them what is that one big advantage of wood over concrete and metal, their answer was fire. Wooden buildings will last the fire the longest. And so their way of thinking and working was just so ahead of times, and it was so beautiful. Then you keep wondering, what can you bring to India, and when can you bring this to India throughout? So, staying inspired and staying personally inspired, I think, is really important. And for inspiration, it is more really staying updated and really being able to know what's going on or what should be going on. Last but not least, one of my favorite things I do, I run a small design school. It's called the Design Village. I recently went for a pitching session, and I thought I'll just share maybe 2 or 3 projects with you on what non-architecturally design thinking is doing in my life, and I hope that brings in better architecture, better realities for all of us. This is a project they're doing where they're making oil edible and making a capsule out of the oil itself. It won every possible award, is now in MoMA. It got the award in New York. This is a project where they were working on the Rohingya community and how they were telling the Rohingyas to fish and actually fend for themselves in the local way when they were being brought to Delhi. Or these were projects where all the residues of carpet wastes were put together to create fabric and garments. Or a student designed a uniform that grows with you, so you don't have the money, but you're growing the fastest at that age. Body shaming is on the cards. So you have this uniform that grows with you gradually for your 12 years of school life, to making textiles as companions, to using waste, to transforming traffic as a way of communicating and socializing. I could go on. The kind of projects, the kinds of realities today's design thinking this generation is working on, this potential, I mean, it's really, really heartwarming. And then to see the school we are building, there's a little thing on the group. So it's called the Design Village, and it's right now working very closely with NIT, NIFT, and Shrishti to represent India at a global platform at multiple places. And so it's really heart-rendering to work with my team to see what next to do. So this really is about how giving back is actually giving it all back to me, and I can take it back with all the energy to be able to put together all these kinds of shared experiences in the old way. So the only thing I would say as a 10th idea, I was told by Shraddha to make the 10 of FOAID important, is to say, let's just go beyond the brief always, something we've always tried to do. Always go beyond your responsibilities. Most importantly, go beyond yourself. I think all of us, especially being in India, need to go beyond ourselves, find our own calling, do what it takes to stay inspired for yourself, be that selfish, and I hope then the architecture does the same. Thank you very much.